Yo, how's it going? Yo, I gotta come on here really quickly and I gotta talk about Spider-Man. Because I really need to get this. Ooh, hold on. There we go. I really have to get this off my chest. I went and saw Spider-Man last night, the new Spider-Man movie, Spider-Man Brand New Day. And it was fucking incredible. It was really good. And it was so much better than I thought it was. I was really worried going into the trailers that they would fumble a lot of the more emotional beats, a lot of the kind of different aspects that they were taking when compared to Holland's three first movies, because it was very clearly going to be different. That being said, it was a breath of fresh air. It was more mature, definitely. In what felt like Tom Holland's Spider-Man trilogy was a very safe, very low consequences storyline for the first three movies until really the very end. It finally felt like a real Peter Parker Spider-Man story, and I was really happy with that. So I'm going to give my quick thoughts on it, just because I liked it that much. I think the only Marvel movie that I like more was Guardians 3 or Guardians 1. But I want to talk about some stuff about the movie. It's very little script, just my initial thoughts, and we're going to go through that. So let's get out of the way what I didn't like, first of all, because it's not much. It's not much. Number one that I didn't like. Not much villain motivation on the part of the damage control director. I understand that wasn't really the point of the movie. I understand that the point of the movie was having Jean Grey be the villain, and I thought Sadie Sink was incredible as Jean Grey, and I thought Jean Grey in the movie was incredible. I like the fact that they changed her a lot from the Jean Grey source material, rather than just being I'm the female X-Men. She now has a lot more going on and a lot more to do, and I'm really happy about that. That being said, I thought there could have been just a little bit more explanation as to what damage control was doing with her, rather than just saying, oh, power in the hands of someone that understands it. That being said, the rest of the movie was pretty good. I struggled to find an aspect of this movie that I really didn't like. I think maybe you could argue that some scenes went on a little bit too long. And then there was a little bit of plot contrivance with MJ finding the letter after he's gone, etc. But, nevertheless, I'm now going to gush about things that I really liked, because I did. I very much enjoyed the movie. First of all, Tom Holland was incredible in it. I've had a lot of gripes with Tom Holland's Spider-Man. I really have. I've had a huge amount of gripes with him. Namely, because I've really never felt like he's been Spider-Man. I think he is a good Peter Parker. I think he's a good, slightly nerdy, New York-style kid. I've never really thought of him as too much of a good Spider-Man because, he was less quippy, a little less proactive, all of these things. However, I think that's finally been patched up, where I think especially when he's talking with the Punisher and with the police commissioner, I think we finally get those aspects of old Spider-Man, classic Spider-Man, where he's ripping one-liners, he's having a good time while he's doing stuff, he's very casual while being a superhero, and that's something I've always enjoyed about Spider-Man. Speaking of the Punisher, very happy. The Netflix Daredevil and the Punisher and that sort of universe of characters is probably my favorite thing Marvel has ever produced. Especially Daredevil, the Punisher, and Jessica Jones. And obviously when it was announced that the Punisher was going to be in Spider-Man, I was very worried about that the film had in the UK it had 12A rating, in America I imagine it was PG-13. So I was very worried that there wasn't going to be a lot of exploration of the Punisher. Luckily, to offset that, we got a very, very tonally different straight-to-streaming special for The Punisher, which was great because he worked through a lot of his issues in that special. I think it took away one of the big things that a lot of people have criticisms with Jon Bernthal's Punisher for, and that's his soul attachment and the struggle of not wanting to be the Punisher, which is something I've never really had a problem with, because in the comic books, Frank Castle loves being the Punisher. There's nothing Frank Castle wants to do more than be the Punisher. However, in the MCU, he's sort of torn between these two worlds. Once the first half of Daredevil Season 2 goes, he's sort of torn between these two places, and he doesn't know whether he wants to be the Punisher or not. That's sort of alleviated now because of how emotionally deep the TV special was. He really is just the Punisher now, and it's great to see him interact with Spider-Man. His new sense of levity, I thought, was a welcome change. It was great, but he was still very much the Punisher. Yeah, I think one thing I really have to praise the movie for, and I think it's honestly one of the best aspects, is the visuals. Not only was a lot of it done practically, I think one of the things that you tend to notice about the older Tom Holland movies is that guy is animated a lot of the time. They are nearly animated Spider-Man movies with how much CGI the Spider-Man suit takes up. Whereas this movie, there was a lot of practical effects. Spider-Man was really present. But more than that, there was a lot of very, very expressive moments of cinematography, which you don't often see with these films unless they're directed by James Gunn. So I really have to praise the movie with that. And it was used sparingly enough that it didn't overwhelm me. I think, to bring up a comparison to another Zendaya project, we'll get to her, but to bring up a comparison to another Zendaya project, Euphoria is a show that I always point to when I have to critique over visualization or over aestheticism of a show. And people say, well, Euphoria looks great. And like, yes, it does. But the sets and the cinematography and the lighting and everything in Euphoria is so over-designed to the point that it sort of loses its luster. And it's really forced upon me. And there's no actual expression in over-designed projects like that, because expression is the correct application of accentuated visuals. If you do it all the time, then it becomes a flat, overstimulating but still boring project. Spider-Man didn't have this issue at all. There were very, I think the best comparison is of practical use of set design and practical use of visuals was when he was hanging with Ned, and the visuals really took a step back to very domestic, very slowed down visuals. That's a scene where you could have had a very aesthetic window shot of the three of them hanging out with, dynamic lighting, etc., etc., etc. But they pulled the reins back there and let the character work speak for itself. And then when Spider-Man's finding the hand or having an issue with his arachnid hormones, that's when the visuals really, really go all out. And I think it's just an incredible directorial choice to balance the mundane with the aesthetic, and I think it really lets the movie shine. Speaking of Zendaya, incredible, phenomenal in this movie, as always. I like the fact she didn't recognize him. I think that would have been a really missed opportunity to develop an emotional story beat, and it's something I was very worried about going in that they would do, is have her, by the end of the movie, not necessarily at the start, but by the end of the movie, recognize Spider-Man and have all of her memories come back. I like the fact they did not do this. I think that is probably the best decision the movie has made. I'm not sold on Ned maybe remember. It's left sort of ambiguous at the end. I'm a little more okay with it being Ned because, one, Ned and Peter have a longer bond, and Ned was the first to find out he was Spider-Man. And number two, Ned is also magic, as of No Way Home. So it makes a little more sense thematically for Ned to remember versus MJ. And also, the emotional beats with MJ wouldn't have hit as hard if she remembered Peter. It would have been a huge cop-out to the rest of the story. That being said, the emotional scenes and the dialogue between them was handled incredibly well. I was blown away by the maturity of the story that they told. It really was great. It was a great movie. I really cannot think of anything in the movie that I vehemently disliked. Aunt May saves the day once again. Classic Spider-Man. the Uncle Ben flashback or the Aunt May, whatever. Great power comes great responsibility. Peter balances being Spider-Man and being Peter Parker. He doesn't go it alone. He still lives in a shitty apartment, though. It felt like sitting down and reading a comic book and just having a really good time with Spider-Man. One thing that I've been seeing that is a critique that other people have levied against the movie is that it tends to get bogged down in trying to connect it to the larger MCU, which is a problem I think a lot of the MCUs are faced with, but it's not a problem I find in Spider-Man. And I'm going to explain what I mean by this. So, there were a lot of MCU characters in this movie. There was obviously the Punisher, but that you sort of get an excuse because Spider-Man, the Punisher, and Daredevil are all part of the New York Street team. They sort of interact with each other on a regular basis, and they go through all the same moral dilemmas and street tier superheroes like the Kingpin that connects all of them, stuff like that, right? The Hulk was in this movie, the actual realized Hulk, which again, I'll come to this, and the new Black Widow was in this movie who brought up the Avengers. So, what does it mean to get bogged down with MCU stuff? And what does it mean to have a connected world? Because these two things are fundamentally different. To illustrate those differences, I want to talk about Guardians 1. Now, Guardians 1 is a great movie. Guardians 1 is a fantastic movie. However, there's a scene where the movie is borderline forced to reconnect itself to the greater MCU, where they have to explain the Infinity Stone, and they have like legit 5 minutes of exposition that serves absolutely nothing to the story because the orb is never opened again. That is only there to do world building for the greater MCU. It detracts from the narrative, in my opinion. Very easily, you could have just had the orb be any sort of anonymous bomb and it doesn't change the story, but it does change the greater MCU story because we miss out on that exposition. In terms of Spider-Man, this is not the case, because fundamentally, these characters popping up function in Spider-Man as narrative devices to forward Spider-Man's own story, right? The Infinity Stone being in Guardians of the Galaxy doesn't really forward the story because the orb could have been any source of power, and everything stays the same. It blows up the Collector's warehouse, and at the end of the thing, Peter can't handle it by himself, and the Guardians have to band together. It does not have to be specifically an Infinity Stone. But it is, because they need that exposition to set up the MCU. Whereas in Spider-Man, all of the narrative exposition and the narrative devices that characters like the Hulk and characters like Yelena, Florence, Pugh do serve to forward Spider-Man's own narrative. So the movie is centered around Spider-Man's character and the inhibiting of his arachnid traits and Spider-Man balancing between Spider-Man and Peter Parker. The Hulk narratively fits that theme and functionally is a narrative device to forward this idea of the inhibitor. You could replace the Hulk with anything. Another professor, a random superhero, it doesn't really matter, and the story would remain largely the same. However, thematically, the Hulk fits really well because he goes through these similar problems. And once again with Yelena, the story doesn't get bogged down because it doesn't detract from the narrative with Yelena's presence. I think if Yelena had to mention the Thunderbirds or explain who the Thunderbirds were or the New Avengers, I think that would then function like the Infinity Stone thing, where it would start to be it would be needless to have her in the story because it would just detract from it by trying to tie it back. But I think functionally because she serves a narrative purpose, tick, 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 and it doesn't detract from Spider-Man's narrative, I think it's okay keeping her in there. I don't know if I vocalized that point entirely correctly. What I'm saying is, both of these narrative devices can be interchangeable with everything, but one narrative device functionally stays the same in the Guardians story, but furthers the MCU story, and the other narrative device in Spider-Man furthers the story of Spider-Man, especially in the Hulk's case. That being said, the performances in the movie was great. MJ's boyfriend only showing up once was a little bit rough, but you know, what are you going to do? But yeah, I'm thinking, as an MCU movie, it's like, As an MCU movie, it's like 14 out of 10. It was ridiculously good. As an actual movie, I'm thinking like a solid 8, 8.5. It was really, really good. I'm very, very happy with it. And that's it, yeah. Go read my blog. This is a channel-only thing. No blog on Spider-Man, channel-only thing. But go read my blog anyway.